Coming up on Over a Barrel, a special edition. Turmoil in the Mideast and a drought in the Midwest, drying up rivers, creating havoc on shipping channels. Over a Barrel starts right now. Welcome to Over a Barrel. I'm your co-host, Matt McLean, alongside the other co-host, Patrick DeHaan, and apparently America is not big enough for the both of us to be in at the same time. Somebody decided he was going to jump across the pond and then some. How's it going, Patrick?
Well, it's going good, Matt. I'm in a place where I think wine is cheaper than gasoline by quite a bit. I strolled down the street today and gasoline was $7.61 a gallon. And, for those listeners, I'm sure they're probably wondering, does anyone want to make a guess before we say where I am? $7.61 a gallon. Actually, I think it was $7.65 a gallon for a gallon of gasoline. But it's a place that wine is cheaper than gasoline, and that might give it away.
I'm thinking of pasta, rolling hills, Tuscany. I don't know. It sounds just amazing right now.
Except filling your tank. The sound of filling your tank would not make you very happy. You'd be hearing a lot of coins falling out of your wallet. But, overseas, Matt.
Well, how much is gas right now where you are by the gallon?
That's what it is. $7.65 a gallon.
So you're in California.
A little bit more. Yeah, not even California, Matt. Even if I went to Beverly Hills, some of those stations are $7.39. So even above and beyond that, I'll give it away. I think you really filled it in there. I'm over in Italy trying to enjoy some time off, but there's never a good time for geopolitical crises, and that's what's happening right now. But the good news, Matt, is as we stand here today, the price of oil is up, but it's not necessarily going to impact what you're paying in the weeks ahead.
Well, but there may be some things out there that might impact the price of oil. I'm looking at all kinds of geopolitical aspects. You leave the country and everything goes to pot, sir. I'm just throwing it out there. We have a lot of things happening. Everything from a drought in the Midwest, which is wreaking havoc on shipping across, the main shipping channels across the Midwest.
Mississippi River.
The Mississippi, the Ohio, the Missouri rivers, all of those, and the Chicago River. These things, along with the man-made canals that kind of attach everything to, look more like creeks than rivers at this point. I was actually driving over two of those rivers I just mentioned yesterday, and last year at this time, I said I had never seen them so low. And this year, that statement still applies because it's worse now than it was last year. So we are running into some issues with that. Now we have geopolitical aspects because since the last time we did a podcast, things have really gotten a bit tense in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas and other aspects. That, according to several stories I am seeing, is causing a jump in oil prices. Hopefully you can kind of disseminate what's going on there and help explain to us why that particular situation is creating some prices in the jump in, a jump in the oil prices. So which one do you want to tackle first? You want to talk about the drought and how that may impact places that get their gasoline and their fuel via barge? Cities small and large along these rivers and their ports get their gasoline wholesale.
That's right.
So which one do you want to really kind of approach first and talk about?
Boy, I think we'll cover the Mississippi. And as you mentioned, a lot of these barges, Matt, transverse the Mississippi River. And when there's a lack of water, we're talking about the Army Corps of Engineers trying to dredge out part of the Mississippi. It's having an impact, but not as big of an impact. And the good news is, I think system-wide, Matt, some of the issues that we're going to talk about, whether it's these issues or the Middle East, are very consistent, is that, we're in the fall. Demand for gasoline is lower, which gives us a little bit more breathing room. We've made the transition to winter gasoline, so that also helps. So the Mississippi River is a little bit limited in scope. It's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, it's been more of a concern for water supplies in areas like New Orleans, where, some of the salt water from the Gulf of Mexico is coming up the Mississippi River.
Saltwater intrusion, yes.
Yeah. So, there is an impact of shipping, but so far, because that is limited in impact by the fact that some of the refineries in the Mississippi are doing maintenance. The bigger issue really is that story you mentioned, Hamas attacking Israel, kind of with the Iran seal of approval, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, which has reported that over the weekend that Iran gave the green light to both Hezbollah and Hamas to attack Israel. That's more of the impact of the price of oil, and oil prices at this moment, Matt, up 4%. But keep in mind, this is a small increase compared to where we saw oil prices just a week ago when they were still north of $90 a barrel. We are now at about $86 a barrel. As I refresh my data here, about $86 a barrel. So it's having an impact, Matt. But because of the extent of issues we've talked about in the past, refinery outages in the West, seemed like a couple weeks ago, but those issues have really calmed down. So for now, the rise in the price of oil is not able to win the tug of war. The proverbial tug of war we've talked about in weeks past is still being won by those seasonal factors that are basically shoving oil prices down in terms of their importance. And we are seeing gas prices fall, Matt. And in fact, one of the biggest weekly decreases in the last several months happened in the last week. All 50 states saw gas prices decline, nowhere more than California, which saw the average price of gasoline falling 22 cents a gallon. And so, this is a big trend, Matt. This 50 of 50 states declining in the last week, that's basically shoving the entire Israeli Hamas situation off to the side because of the seasonality, the falling gasoline demand, the change to fall blend of gasoline is shoving everything aside. And that's why basically all of our listeners, Matt, are looking at the pumps, seeing lower prices.
So the question mark that I have in my mind for you, Patrick, I'm actually probably going to put you on the spot by asking why. Why is the conflict between Israel and Hamas creating a jump in oil prices? And then also why, help me understand why the drought is not creating as many issues as I would have expected, simply because I sent you some information prior to recording. The Mississippi in certain locations after one of its main tributaries, the Ohio River, drains into it, is still below. It's what's called -6 feet. Now, that doesn't mean the Mississippi is 6 feet underground. I just want to point that out. There is a 0-foot pool that the Army Corps of Engineers always maintains for shipping. And when it goes below that pool, it falls into what's called a negative number. And I've got a lot of knowledge and aspects on this. And so at -6 feet, what that simply means is the Army Corps of Engineers can no longer guarantee safe passage or safe shipping. There's the increased risk of barges and or the tugs basically running aground. That's where the main concern runs. So they have to start filling barges with less and less materials. It doesn't matter if it's grain, crude oil, fuel, or anything else. They have to lighten the load because there's not as much water.
All that weight. That's right.
So you're saying it's really not having that much of an impact on gasoline. That's why I'm asking why. So I'm throwing you completely off, and I know that.
Well, there's a limited amount of refineries in the Mississippi River. I think one of the ones more upriver is the Valero refinery in Memphis. But downriver, Matt, there's a lot of refineries in Louisiana, but there's also a lot of pipelines that and places of export that can alleviate some of the challenges brought on by low water. Now, you're right, there are some headaches happening, but a lot of those are behind the scenes and they're diminished by the fact that gasoline demand is lower and that some of these products can flow into different areas and then be brought in. So, the Mississippi River, this would... Well, brought in by rail, brought in by barge and other areas that can be piped into areas like Louisiana. But by and large, Matt, the reason that prices are going up too overseas, worth mentioning, is because oil hates turmoil. Russia's war in Ukraine was much more of a profound impact on the price of oil. If you remember back to those days in 2022, the price of oil basically doubled in less than a couple of weeks' time. Now, Israel, Palestine, this is not an area of the Middle East that produces a lot of oil, but there are risks risks that include Iran. Iran is a large oil producer. It's not as large as Russia. It does come down on the list. It's in the top 15, top 10. But keep in mind that Iran was heavily sanctioned. So, this oil is not exactly free flowing to the market. The risk, Matt, is like many in the Middle East, is that this turmoil, this violence could start to spread. That's the worry, is that there are a lot of major oil producers in the Middle East. If this violence spreads beyond the borders of Israel to the Gaza Strip, then you may be having more of a problem. That's why oil prices have been rather restrained in their response, is because there's still a relatively low risk that these problems could move beyond these borders. And that's because Jordan and Egypt have been very heavily involved in diplomacy, trying to soften the blow. We did see a story in the Wall Street Journal that did suggest that Iran had a direct role. That is problematic, because if Israel decides to directly attack Iran, that could bring directly more of a problem to Iran's oil production. Keep in mind, the U.S. Iran has been producing oil. It's been, having limited success selling that oil in the global market because of some of those U.S. sanctions. But, part of why they may be emboldened is because the U.S. made a deal with Iran to allow some of that previous cash flow from oil to flow into Iran in the form of humanitarian aid. So there's a lot of things here going on. I think, Matt, the biggest risk to gas prices, if this problem starts to grow, if it draws in Iran, if somehow, by the way, it draws in Saudi Arabia. Keep in mind, part of the reason why Iran may have attacked Israel is because Saudi Arabia and Israel in the United States had been working on a security pact in which the U.S. would agree to send some of its more advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia had been, over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal reported that Saudi Arabia had been willing to increase oil production if a deal happened. And so Iran is feeling like it's stuck in a corner, and a timeout with limited options. And so Iran decided, hey, we don't have anything to lose. We're going to attack Israel and try and drive the world into this, period of chaos. So for now, again, because the area affected is not a major oil producer, Iran is. So we're watching to see if there's possible implications, Matt. But that's why the price of oil is only up a couple of percentage points, and I would still classify that as much of a knee-jerk reaction.
So then now I've got to come back and start asking follow-up questions. And this is kind of cool because we normally don't do a podcast where I'm asking about two subjects at once, and I'm doing it anyway because it's just fun to me at this point. So on the first topic, the drought, is there obviously a point in which you are going to get concerned that, if the river drops another foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever, you may realize that we're going to start running into issues? Because there are things like Memphis, St. Louis, and other metro areas that rely very heavily on shipping on the Mississippi. And then like the Ohio, you've got, the state that I'm in, if I say it anything other than Louisville, I'll probably be flogged, but I want to say Louisville, as well as Cincinnati and other major metropolitan areas. I mean, is there a point where we start running into issues regarding with fuel? That's question one. Question two, I'm going to regard to your expertise on the Middle East because of the oil aspects. Is there a threshold that we will find in this particular conflict that we are looking at, and you start to become concerned that oil may just suddenly start really jumping in price in a major way because we've run into a situation that it's creating a problem?
Well, I think first and foremost, Matt, the reason why the Mississippi River being low is not such a priority or a concern yet is because the amount of pipelines that traverse much of this area, the Ohio Valley, even to St. Louis. A lot of these areas are still served by pipeline, and that barges may ship components to refineries, but that still, there's a lot of refined product pipelines that would, kind of alleviate the situation with the Mississippi. So that's why it doesn't necessarily rise to a critical level just yet. And again, the fall months are when there's a little bit more breathing room. So all of that, kind of pales in comparison right now to what's been happening with Israel and the attacks on Israel. The worrisome sign, Matt, is if violence spirals out of control and moves into a country that is a major oil producer. Right now, as I mentioned, Iran, the fact that Iran has basically, according to the Wall Street Journal at least, said that it green lighted the attacks, that could bring attacks on Iran via Israel, and that could be more problematic for the price of oil, because while Iran has been sanctioned and a lot of that oil hasn't made it to the market, that still would imperil the normal flow, even the curtailed flow of oil to the global market.
See, I try to stump you every single time, and this is what happens. You're just like, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to answer these questions, and that's that. So you kind of you are even probably in your Italian pasta overloaded brain at this point. You are able to answer. So that's
and this time I guess it's over a wine barrel. But Matt, it's always over a barrel. You'd think that the war, the potential war between Israel and Hamas and Iran may put us over a barrel. But again, Matt, we've talked about this for the last several weeks, that refineries have made a huge impact on what you're paying at the pump. And now with a lot of those refinery issues behind us, it's not so much of an impact. The more critical aspect is that the entire nation is now on that cheaper, easier to produce winter gasoline. And, there's kind of two ways to look at this, Matt. There's upstream. The price of oil does have an impact on gasoline. But as we've mentioned, refineries have had a far more impactful, impact on the price. Far more impactful portion of the barrel has been impacted by refineries and outages and maintenance. And I mean, that's just, when you're talking about $6.50 gasoline in LA, a lot of that has been driven by refinery outages. And so when those refinery outages improve, it's going to completely offset any, 3 or 4% jump in the price of oil. And again, Matt, it's all about the timing. If Hamas had attacked Israel in the spring, oh man, we'd be off to the races. We would see probably an impact to the upside of 10 to 25 cents a gallon. But the fact that this is happening in the fall, when seasonality is pushing the other side of pressure, it's pushing prices down. There's only so much that an issue in a non-oil producing region can cause. Now, as I said, the primary impact here could be if this violence spreads, but the way it stands now, it's not going to have a meaningful impact on what you're paying at the pump.
So the next question I've got for you is actually, will this mitigate how low prices would have gone at the pump? In other words, is it going to cost us money in the fact that it's not going to allow prices to lower as much as they would had this conflict not have taken place?
Perfectly asked question. Absolutely, Matt. It will. It probably will prevent prices from going down to $3.20 a gallon, maybe $3.15. Now prices could go down to $3.25, maybe $3.20. So yes, there is an impact at the bottom of the ladder, but Matt, prices are still at the top of the ladder climbing down. So, we don't notice the impact because it's offset, right? Instead of going down as low, we're going to fall less. And that's the best way to ask the question. And that's why people don't understand it, because there's so much built up downside that it's not going to stop the downside from happening, but we will have less distance to fall as a result of what's currently happening.
Okay, so that is certainly something that is going to impact really anybody listening to this podcast inside the United States, which is prices. Prices, had this conflict not happened, might have dropped to XYZ price, and instead they're probably only going to fall and this amount, a certain amount instead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you and I have been at our respective professions for a good number of years. So I'm simply going to ask you, as the journalist experience on my side, the person who is extremely experienced in predicting oil and gas prices, and I know you'll always give a straight up forward answer to this. How concerned or worried are you with regard to everything that is taking place in basically the areas of the world that produce the most oil, the Middle East? How concerned and worried are you that this could really ratchet out of control fairly quickly, and then we will be paying a lot at the pump?
Well, let me try to be very specific. The current situation, Hamas's attack in Israel, is typically, Matt, from the perspective of oil prices, a very low impact, because there's been a lot of, Hezbollah and Hamas attacking Israel. I mean, in its own regard, I don't want to be insensitive to the loss of life. The loss of life that has happened in Israel. It's been terrible watching the violence unfold. But from the perspective of the price of oil, Matt, it is not very impactful. The more impactful part of this situation is if this violence spreads to oil-producing nations, if it destabilizes the broader Middle East, because the Middle East produces a lot of oil, Matt. These regions do not necessarily produce a lot of oil. So the concern is, does this spread beyond the borders of Palestine, of the Gaza Strip, of Israel, and does it affect larger oil-producing nations?
Yeah, and there are accusations/credits being given, but in a complete asterisk. The U.S. is saying so far they have not been able to independently prove it, but Hamas is indicating that Iran is who basically backed this attack for them to do it, as well as possibly providing even some of the weaponry that has been used in some manner or fashion. Again, the United States government is indicating that they cannot independently confirm that information. However, they also immediately say this is, and I'm paraphrasing, not an exact quote, but this is basically not out of the realm of possibilities for what Iran has typically done or does typically do. So according to some of the stories, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard gave the go-ahead last week from their location in Beirut, and that Hamas was basically being provided all of this ability from Iran to attack Israel. So the question mark that I have in my mind is, will the Israeli government then create a larger situation? And I'm not even saying if that's a good or a bad thing, justifiably, whatever the case may be. I mean, if the United States, had California that had 5,000 missiles launched into it from an enemy, of course the United States is going to respond. Not saying Israel has no right, but the key question mark is, if Israel says, okay, Iran, we found our proof, we know what's going on, we're coming after you, then we do have a bit of a situation. And I only bring it up because Prime Minister Netanyahu, quote, has vowed to change, quote, change the Middle East, unquote. So now, he's being a very firm leader at this point because his country is under attack.
Right.
But it's not something that we can just look at and say, oh, whatever, it'll never happen either.
No, exactly right, Matt. And that's where the concern comes is Israel has an absolute right to defend itself when attacked in an unprovoked way, the way that things have happened. And again, I don't want to be insensitive, right? I'm an oil analyst, so usually the angle I look at is the perspective, the impact to a commodity like oil when these types of things happen. I'm a human. I'm sensitive to what's happened there, but my professional job is to look at how this could impact the commodity, the price of oil, the price of refined products. And that's the primary concern, is that when this starts to shift, when this type of violence starts to bring in a country like Iran that's a larger oil producer. I mean, Matt, not to, again, I mean, Israel has every right to defend itself and go after. This is the equivalent of Israel's 9/11.
Yeah, and neither of us, by the way, are saying otherwise.
No, of course not.
Clear about that. Yeah. This is strictly an oil an analyst of an oil situation and gasoline situation. I do want to point that out for both of our sakes. We are not in any way trying to be insensitive. This is strictly a conversation about the price of oil, gasoline, and its impact, not just on the U.S., but even potentially globally. So that is all there. It looks like we've lost Patrick for just a moment. The Italian internet, are you there? I just go and give the disclaimer, and Patrick has disappeared. There he is.
Well,
he's back.
I'm back with you.
All right. So, we were just talking about that, and we're not trying to downplay in any way aspect. Israel has a right to do what Israel is doing, no question. It's just the oil aspect, analyzation, and the pricing. So talk to us from that perspective only, in that context.
Well, when Iran comes out and says that they've, given Hamas or Hezbollah green light, they have active participation in this. And that really opens up the door for Israel to defend itself against not only the primary contributors to this attack, but any, secondary contributors to this attack, and that could be Iran. And that's the concern here, is that if Israel does defend itself and go after every party that's been involved here, I mean, look at the United States in 9/11. We didn't just go, against one or two parties. We were attacking on multiple fronts. So if Israel does the same and going after Iran, that is the bigger problem that could contribute, Matt, to oil prices potentially rising. Now, if Israel does launch a broad attack on Iran, if it goes after Iran's oil fields, refining capacity, then we could be talking about the price of gasoline, or the price of oil could rally beyond $90 a barrel. Now, that is a what if, but even at $90 or $95 a barrel, Matt, even if oil did get closer to $100 a barrel, we still have a lot of downward momentum in the price of gasoline. Now, if we got down to, say, $3.25 a gallon, Matt, and this happened then, as I mentioned, then there would be some upside. But we still have a lot of relief that stations have to deliver on. But that is a primary concern, Matt, as you mentioned. Iran being attacked, or if Israel chooses to go after Iran, that would be the more problematic impact that could have a more substantial impact on the price of oil, and thus could impact your wallets a little bit more. But for now, Matt, I'd like to revert back to gas prices. Every single state in the last week has seen average gas prices decline. That's a trend that will continue this week unless something major, even if Israel were to go after Iran, we would not see an increase this week or even potentially next week, probably, and not until the end of October.
Yeah, and it's it's kind of our policy. We're not trying to scare anybody. We're not trying to. That is the policy. We don't do that. So in these situations, we kind of always try to point that out. It is really the policy that we not try to scare someone into the aspect, but rather also present truthful aspects as the possibilities.
Of course.
And one of those aspects could be, and one would think a common sense would be, places like Saudi Arabia, the United States, and other aspects that are able to produce oil would probably increase to try to offset any kind of a decrease in a situation like that, I would assume.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's kind of the bigger conversation here, Matt, is that Saudi Arabia, part of the reason why Iran may have gone after Israel is because Iran feels like it's been cornered. Again, the United States, Israel, and the Saudis have been working on a potential security pact in which the Saudis would get U.S. weaponry. The Israelis would be recognized by the Saudis, which would be big. And the U.S. could have a major peacekeeping role or a diplomatic role in the Middle East to offset China's influence. And to boot, Saudi Arabia has signaled, or had signaled prior to this, that it would be willing to consider raising raising Saudi oil production to potentially soften the price of oil. So that's a win-win-win. Now, Iran, sensing that it was left in the dust, may have done this attack to try and derail that. The question, Matt, that's intriguing for me is, will the Israelis, will Saudi Arabia, I mean, is there enough evidence here on all sides for this pact to still move forward? Because if there is, this could still lead to, positive outcomes for everyone else. But the Saudis also, according to the Israelis, they were somewhat disappointed with how the Saudis responded to this. Having said that, MBS has been known to despise Hamas, and he is very eager for diplomatic wins when it comes to security pacts. And so this deal may not be derailed, but keep a very close eye on it. This is a big wild card.
So we have a lot, obviously, of things going on, stuff that will, in future podcasts, obviously be keeping everybody who's listening right now and anybody who's a new listener up to date on, for sure. To kind of bottom line this, what are you seeing for prices here in the United States. I know you're sitting in Israel right now paying California gas prices, but,
or Italy, as it turns out.
Yeah. Well, apparently Italy and California like the same kind of price points for gasoline. No, I'm just joking on that aspect. But to kind of bottom line this, what are you seeing for the next 5 to 7 days? And I realize that's a crystal ball that's probably a little cloudy and hazy on the inside, because I recognize it's going to really matter almost hour to hour on things that can take place. But let's just use the platform or the foundation that if things stay the same as they are right now, probably won't, but if they do, where do you see prices going, at least over the next couple of days?
Well, Matt, I think, 97% of the situation, can be accounted for. Gas prices will continue declining in all 50 states. Matt, we're seeing now thousands of stations below $3 a gallon at $2.99 a gallon or less. The latest count, we had almost 20 states where at least one station was below $3. That's a trend that'll continue, Matt, at least for this week, unless the situation massively changes. We are looking still at average gas prices that are going to be declining in every state. Probably the most in the West Coast, Matt, California, Arizona, Nevada. Motorists should not be in any hurry to fill their tank. I know there's a little bit of anxiety given what's going on in the Middle East and the price of oil going up. But for now, the coast over the next several days is clear. Gas prices in every state will continue to decline for now.
Oh, I tell you, we've got a lot going on. When do you get back stateside? That's yeah.
Not soon enough with all of this going on, but
right?
Matt, I'll be back soon enough. I think the 18th, mid next week is when I'm back. I'm sure we'll probably try and talk at least one more time here in the next week. But for now, if you don't follow us, check us out at Over a Barrel Show. And of course, you're at Over a Barrel Matt, and I'm at Gas Buddy Guy. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Check out our new Facebook page at Over a Barrel Show. But Matt, great to be with you from Italy. I hope everything in the States stays calm, and we'll be on top of this. So we'll talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.